point two that we had down was the role employment can play in rehabilitation, and you sort of talked about that as well. So, how do you just as a question, how do you think PDRSs and clinical services look at employment for their clients?
I know when I was working in a psychosocial rehab service prior to the clubhouse, and particularly if you've worked in England, I'd worked in mental health services or an assessment centre. I was removed from the world of work, and so didn't really realise, had no idea what was involved in working in an office. So I think it is difficult to get a sense of what's required in a number of different positions. It's difficult to know how best to respond when some of the participants or clients you're working with talk about getting back to work. Some may have had a significant work history prior to becoming unwell and may hope to get back to that kind of work routine. And I think a part of you feels that if you encourage them to go back to full-time work, you might be helping to set them up, setting somebody up to fail. But you're not sure what would be suitable for them, and you don't want to be insulting by saying, well, I think you should just look at entry-level work. So there are a lot of complex reactions that get in the way of a clear path forward for that person to return to work or commence work for the first time. And what is important is that there is a coordinated message. Again, from experience, there were many people I and others worked with who would get one message from their clinical team about the risk of becoming too stressed by returning to work, and that wouldn't be good for the illness. Carers may have a different perspective, or the same. The PDRS services and the disability employment services, of course, will have a different view. And in an environment where there is a lot of confusion, ambiguity, it's quite a complex environment. To increase the confusion for the individual by having mixed messages about whether they're able to work or not isn't helpful. And I think most people would agree now that the single most important criterion is that the person wants to work, and then it is up to the rest of us and that person to help make that happen. So whether that's just a few hours a week in a supportive environment, or somebody getting training and then going on to work in a supportive work environment or into independent employment, I think that is the flame that you have to start with.
So clearly you're passionate about the employment role in mental health. How did you end up focusing on that? You've got a long history in working in mental health. How did you end up focusing on employment?
I think it was working in the clubhouse model where we could see the difference a return to work made for people. There's a line I often use: the last one to discover water will be the fish. We get so busy in our work routines and racing around, answering the mobile, writing reports, muttering about deadlines, that it's such a luxury, for people who aren't required to meet deadlines. And in fact, probably nobody is that bothered whether they're up or in the day or at night. It's so important to have that sense of being needed, and that's where rehabilitation starts for a lot of people. That sense of being needed, it's a very powerful human need, and not reinforced by messages that, well, you've got the pension, you've got supported accommodation, you've got somewhere to go in the day, you've got services that are being delivered. It's all about receiving a service, whereas being able to work and being paid for that work is very much about recognising that that person can make a valuable contribution, is making a difference to the world around them. And I think that goes into the heart of recovery, as well as social inclusion and all the benefits of having paid employment. And there was one particular instance when we had a group work programme from the clubhouse in Richmond, where somebody who hadn't worked for many years joined the crew. He'd been in hospital for many decades, and so was in his 50s when he joined this particular group, going to pack health food products at a health food business. And it was on the way back, he asked to get off at a tram stop to go to Brighton. We had a half-hour drive to get back to Richmond, and he had about an hour's train ride from there to get back to his home in Heidelberg. And when I suggested he might want to leave visiting his friend till another day because he'd just done his first day's work in many years, his response was, "But I promised my friend I'd call in on my way home from work." And it meant so much to him to be able to tell his friend I'd call in on my way home from work that was quite a turning point for me, and that we need to be very energetic about helping people find employment that's accessible and durable. A lot of people get help to start a job, but for many people it's maintaining employment that's the challenge. And the number of people who are uncomfortable disclosing that they have a mental illness in an interview is understandable, and to try and create supportive work environments where people can discuss their support needs and know that it's fine to talk about your diagnosis or the medication, or you need to see the doctor, or need to have some information repeated, seems like a very sort of logical workplace to be energetic about developing.